It's not picking up either.
I didn't know I could message people sitting in the waiting room.
Mhm.
Huh. I learn something new every day.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I am going to pull, oops, not hit the wrong button, apparently. No answer.
Mm-mm.
Oh, my eyes are so watery today. I promise you I'm not crying. Okay. So let me share my thing and we'll go ahead and do our little Zen out. Oh, there's Trevor. Mitt. Okay. And then I'll just let people in as they come. All right. Close this. Too much stuff open on this computer.
Raw session number 64, July 26th, 1981. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Questioner. Could you first tell me the condition of the instrument? I am Ra. It is as previously stated, with the exception of a transitory distortion lessening the free flow of vital energy. Questioner. Can you tell what the transitory distortion is? I am Ra. This is marginal information. Questioner. Then we won't question on it. I would like to ask first about a mistake I believe that I might have made in the last session on the number of wanderers on Earth today. Did I make an error? I am Ra. You and Ra made an error. The appropriate number of your ciphers is one less than previously stated. Editor's note. In 63.10, Don states 600 million as the number of wanderers on Earth. The correct number is 60 million. This error has been corrected in this audiobook. Questioner. Thank you. Could you explain the basic principles behind the ritual which we perform to initiate the contact and what I would call the basic white magical rituals? I am Ra. Due to your avenue of question, we perceive the appropriateness of inclusion of the cause of this instrument's transitory vital energy distortion. The cause is a bias towards the yearning for expression of devotion to the one creator in group worship. This entity was yearning for this protection, both consciously, in that it responds to the accoutrement of this expression, the ritual, the colors and their meanings, as given by the distortion system of what you call the church, the song of praise, and the combined prayers of thanksgiving, and, most of all, that which may be seen to be most centrally magical, the intake of that food which is not of this dimension, but has been transmuted into metaphysical nourishment in what this distortion of expression calls the Holy Communion. The subconscious reason, it being the stronger for this yearning, was the awareness that such expression is, when appreciated by an entity as a transmutation into the presence of the one creator, a great protection of the entity as it moves in the path of service to others. The principle behind any ritual of the white magical nature is to so configure the stimuli which reach down into the trunk of mind that this arrangement causes the generation of disciplined and purified emotion or love, which then may be both protection and the key to the gateway to intelligent infinity. Editor's note. This was the only session with Ra that was ever held on a Sunday when Carla would normally be singing sacred music in the choir at church. Questioner. Can you tell me why the slight error made in the ritual starting this communication 2 sessions ago allowed the intrusion of one Orion-affiliated entity? I am Ra. This contact is narrow band, and its preconditions precise. The other self, offering its service in the negative path, also is possessed of the skill of the swordsman. You deal in this contact with, shall we say, forces of great intensity, poured into a vessel as delicate as a snowflake, and as crystalline. The smallest of lapses may disturb the regularity of this pattern of energies which forms the channel for these transmissions. We may note, for your information, that our pause was due to the necessity of being quite sure that the mind-body-spirit complex of the instrument was safely in the proper light configuration or density before we dealt with the situation. Far better would it be to allow the shell to become unviable than to allow the mind-body-spirit complex to be, shall we say, misplaced. Questioner. Could you describe rituals or techniques used by Ra in seeking in the direction of service? I am Ra. To speak of that which sixth-density social memory complexes labor within in order to advance is at best misprision of plain communication, for much is lost in transmission of concept from density to density, and the discussion of sixth density is inevitably distorted greatly. However, we shall attempt to speak to your query, for it is an helpful one, in that it allows us to express once again the total unity of creation. We seek the Creator upon a level of shared experience to which you are not privy, and rather than surrounding ourselves in light, we have become light. Our understanding is that there is no other material except light. Our rituals, as you may call them, are an infinitely subtle continuation of the balancing processes which you are now beginning to experience. We seek now without polarity. Thus, we do not invoke any power from without, for our search has become internalized as we become light-love and love-light. These are the balances we seek, the balances between compassion and wisdom, which, more and more, allow our understanding of experience to be informed that we may come closer to the unity with the one Creator, which we so joyfully seek. Your rituals, at your level of progress, contain the concept of polarization, and this is most central at your particular space-time. We may answer further if you have specific queries. Editor's note. The word misprision in the previous passage can be defined as meaning neglect or wrong performance of official duty, or misunderstanding or mistake. Questioner. Would it be helpful if Ra were to describe the techniques used while Ra was in third density to evolve in mind, body, and spirit? I am Ra. This query lies beyond the law of confusion. Questioner. What about fourth density experience of Ra? Would that also lie beyond the law of confusion? I am Ra. This is correct. Let us express a thought. Ra is not elite. To speak of our specific experiences to a group which honors us is to guide to the point of a specific advising. Our work was that of your peoples, of experiencing the catalyst of joys and sorrows. Our circumstances were somewhat more harmonious. Let it be said that any entity or group may create the most splendid harmony in any outer atmosphere. Ra's experiences are no more than your own. Yours is the dance at this space-time in third density harvest. Questioner. The question was brought up recently having to do with possible records left near, in, or under the Great Pyramid at Giza. I have no idea whether this would be a benefit. I will just ask if there is any benefit in investigating in this area. I am Ra. We apologize for seeming to be so shy of information. However, any words upon this particular subject create the possibility of infringement upon free will. Questioner. In a previous session, you mentioned the gateway of magic for the adept occurring in 18-day cycles. Could you expand on that information, please? I am Ra. The mind-body-spirit complex is born under a series of influences, both lunar, planetary, cosmic, and in some cases, karmic. The moment of the birthing into this illusion begins the cycles we have mentioned. The spiritual, or adept's cycle, is an 18-day cycle. It operates with the qualities of the sine wave. Thus, there are a few excellent days on the positive side of the curve, that being the first 9 days of the cycle, precisely the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th, when workings are most appropriately undertaken, given that the entity is still without total conscious control of its mind-body-spirit distortion/reality. The most interesting portion of this information, like that of each cycle, is a noting of the critical point wherein, passing from the 9th to the 10th, and from the 18th to the 1st days, the adept will experience some difficulty, especially when there is a transition occurring in another cycle at the same time. At the nadir of each cycle, the adept will be at its least powerful, but will not be open to difficulties in nearly the degree that it experiences at critical times. Questioner. Then, to find the cycles, we would take the instant of birth and the emerging of the infant from the mother into this density and start the cycle at that instant and continue it through the life. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is mostly correct. It is not necessary to identify the instant of birthing. The diurnal cycle upon which this event occurs is satisfactory for all but the most fine workings. Questioner. Now, am I correct in assuming that whatever magic the adept would perform would be more successful, or shall we say, more to his design, than that performed at less opportune times in the cycle? I am Ra. The cycle is an helpful tool to the adept, but, as we said, as the adept becomes more balanced, the working's design will be dependent less and less upon these cycles of opportunity, and more even in their efficacy. Questioner. I have no ability to judge at what point, at what level of abilities, the adept would reach this point of being, shall we say, independent of the cyclical action. Can you give me an indication of what level of adeptness that would be necessary to be so independent? I am Ra. We are fettered from speaking specifically due to this group's work, for to speak would seem to be to judge. However, we may say that you may consider this cycle in the same light as the so-called astrological balances within your group. That is, they are interesting, but not critical. Questioner: Thank you. I read that recent research has indicated that the normal sleep cycle for entities on this planet occurs 1 hour later each diurnal period, so that we have a 25-hour cycle instead of a 24. Is this correct? And if so, why is this? I am Ra. This is, in some cases, correct. The planetary influences, from which those of Mars experience memory, have some effect upon these third-density physical bodily complexes. This race has given its genetic material to many bodies upon your plane. Questioner: Thank you. Ra mentioned the ones Stewart and Douglas in a recent session. These are members of what we call our medical profession. What is the value of modern medical techniques in alleviating bodily distortions with respect to the purpose for these distortions and what we might call karma and other effects? I am Ra. This query is convoluted. However, we shall make some observations in lieu of attempting one coherent answer, for that which is allopathic among your healing practices is somewhat two-sided. Firstly, you must see the probability that each and every allopathic healer is, in fact, an healer. Within your cultural nexus, this training is considered the appropriate means of perfecting the healing ability. In the most basic sense, any allopathic healer may be seen to, perhaps, be one whose desire is service to others in alleviation of bodily complex and mental-emotional complex distortions, so that the entity to be healed may experience further catalyst over a longer period of what you call the life. This is a great service to others when appropriate, due to the accumulation of distortions toward wisdom and love, which can be created through the use of the space-time continuum of your illusion. In observing the allopathic concept of the body complex as the machine, we may note the symptomology of a societal complex seemingly dedicated to the most intransigent desire for the distortions of distraction, anonymity, and sleep. This is the result, rather than the cause, of societal thinking upon your plane. In turn, this mechanical concept of the body complex has created the continuing proliferation of distortions towards what you would call ill health, due to the strong chemicals used to control and hide bodily distortions. There is a realization among many of your peoples that there are more efficacious systems of healing, not excluding the allopathic, but also including the many other avenues of healing. Questioner: Let us assume that a bodily distortion occurs within a particular entity who then has a choice of seeking allopathic aid or experiencing the catalyst of the distortion and not seeking correction of the distortion. Can you comment on the two possibilities for this entity and his analysis of each path? I am Ra. If the entity is polarized towards service to others, analysis properly proceeds along the lines of consideration of which path offers the most opportunity for service to others. For the negatively polarized entity, the antithesis is the case. For the unpolarized entity, the considerations are random and, most likely, in the direction of the distortion towards comfort. Questioner: Dr. Monroe, I understand, brought a four-toed Bigfoot cast by here the other day. Could you tell me which form of Bigfoot that cast was? I am Ra. We can. Editor's note: Dr. Burt Monroe was the head of the biology department at the University of Louisville. Questioner: I know it is totally unimportant, but as a service to Dr. Monroe, I thought that I should ask that. I am Ra. This entity was one of a small group of thought forms. Questioner: He also asked, and I know this is unimportant, why there were no Bigfoot remains found after the Bigfoot entities had died on our surface. He had asked why there had never been any remains of these entities found. Could you answer this for him? It's of no importance, but just as a service to him, I ask it. I am Ra. You may suggest that exploration of the caves which underlie some of the western coastal mountain regions of your continent will one day offer such remains. They will not be generally understood if this culture survives in its present form long enough in your time measurement for this probability-possibility vortex to occur. There is enough energy for one more full query at this time. Questioner. In the healing exercises, when you say examine the sensations of the body, do you mean those sensations available to the body via the five senses, or in relation to the natural functions of the body, such as touching, loving, sexual sharing, and company, or are you speaking of something else altogether? I am Ra. The questioner may perceive its body complex at this moment. It is experiencing sensations. Most of these sensations, or in this case nearly all of them, are transient and without interest. However, the body is the creature of the mind. Certain sensations carry importance due to the charge or power which is felt by the mind upon the experience of this sensation. For instance, at this space-time nexus, one sensation is carrying a powerful charge and may be examined. This is the sensation of what you call the distortion towards discomfort due to the cramped position of the body complex during this working. In balancing, you would then explore this sensation. Why is this sensation powerful? Because it was chosen in order that the entity might be of service to others in energizing this contact. Each sensation that leaves the aftertaste of meaning upon the mind, that leaves the taste within the memory, shall be examined. These are the sensations of which we speak. May we answer any brief queries before we leave this instrument? Questioner. Is there anything that we could do to make the instrument more comfortable or to improve the contact? I am Ra. Continue to consider the alignments. You are conscientious and aware of the means of caring for the instrument in its present distortions, having to do with the wrists and hands. As always, love is the greatest protection. I am Ra. I leave you, my friends, in the glorious love and joyful light of the infinite Creator. Go forth then, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai.
Okay. So up here it showed how you could find out what number you're on in your own in that 18 cycle. So I'll put the link in there that they put to get to the calculator, but I did my own. So my birthday, October 19th, 88. And then this number right here, age, in days, you take that number and you divide it by 18. Let me move this over so I can actually see it. So it's 1, 2, 4, 7, 6 divided by 18. And you get this long old number. And then you subtract the number before the decimal from it. So in my case, it'd be 693. And then you get this bad boy, and you times that by 18, I believe. Crap, I hope so. Yeah, by 18, and then you get the day that you're on. So mine's 2. I'm on my second day, and that 18th day transit cycle for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe
me-
it's someone's speaker.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Oh, now there's no echo. All right, great. So yeah, I was thinking, I guess, yeah, at 9 days, you would be back to 0. And then at, so what is it? 8 days, you'd be back 9 days. Yeah. And then 4.5 days, you'd be at the peak. And then at 12.5 days, you'd be at the bottom. If you have a proper sine wave. I don't know, that's just does that sound right? I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
That sounds right, because in the reading, he said, what was it, day 4, 5, and 6 would be the most positive. So like 4.5 would be the upper part of the curve, I think. The 9 would be resting on the baseline. And 13.5 would be the bottom, the nadir. And then the 18 is the go back to baseline. Sounds like.
All right, sounds great. Oh,
Can't hear you,
you're
Desiree.
muted.
I know I'm reading out loud to myself to try to fully, I know what you're trying to say, so I'm looking at it and trying to be like, yeah. So I had just had myself muted because I think the echo was coming from my own because I usually have my headphones in. Um, but yeah, just give me a minute. I'm just looking. If anybody else has anything to say about that, by all means, feel free. But I'm trying to get on board with what you're trying to tell me.
But there was a visual graph calculator that showed that when you entered your birthday.
Yeah, that I shared that last time, the biorhythm one.
Yeah, that was my first meeting.
Yep.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, that link. So I could probably get it for you. Give me one moment. Cause yeah, it does. It shows the whole curve and the day of the month and everything else with it too. So yes, let me go pull that up. I'm gonna mute me though, so that when someone else talks, it doesn't echo. I'm gonna get that link right now.
I also like how in this session they talked about Bigfoot. They also alluded that our civilization might not last too long in that answer. Here it says, where is it? Here, you'll find it in the western coastal regions of your continent will one day offer such remains. They will not be generally understood if this culture survives in its present form long enough in your time measurement for this probability vortex to occur. So if it's a different culture that is, say, more open-minded to Bigfoot, then it will be understood, but not the present culture.
Or could it be a reference to California having a major disaster?
Could be. I for my first interpretation when I heard that was technology. So if we had some slightly more sensitive detective equipment in the visual and audible fields, we might be able to detect some more information in these places. But we'd also have to have that change in our society, like you're saying, Andrew, in the mind to get to that advancement in technology, which could happen very quickly. Because there's like that talk about how the ultraviolet contains a lot of things in the visual field. When you take that information and throw it through a transducer, you can interpret any field of information like X-ray telescopes and other things like this into visual displays. So if we did that with more focus and more sensitivity in certain places in the ultraviolet, people think that we'll see a third strand on our DNA. We'll start to see ghosts and other spirits and things like this in the actual auric fields. And that's where a lot of our higher energies lie, is out that side of the rainbow in the purples rather than the infrareds and the reds.
Well, I know that the best technology that we have right now for finding stuff is the human brain, especially remote viewing. Like with remote viewing, they're able to like find kidnappers of children or whatever almost immediately. They're at this gas station, pumping or whatever, like they're really good at it. And so I think that if we just had a culture that was, say, more open-minded to Bigfoot and remote viewing, then we would probably just find them.
And
well,
go ahead, Trevor, please.
Was just going to throw in a big spanner into the works because I know a few people, I was going to say, who do the Bigfoot investigations in the US. And there's one girl who was posting a recent photo recently that I was having a look at, checking out. It was looking pretty cool, but not many people realize that you've got these things all around the world. You call them Bigfoot in America, Yetis and abominable snowmans and other beings like this. Well, we've got them here in Australia too. And there's two different varieties of them. Mostly there's two different varieties. There's huge different mobs and groups and all this other sort of stuff going on. And they come under a few different names, but yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And it's really cool to see them bring that up. And then also I love the way that Don come at it from as doing service to this guy, because he's obviously really passionate about it. So just asking this question for him would be a huge, awesome moment for this guy that is just so easy for Don to do. It's like a really good example of simple service meaning a lot.
Yeah, I was reading, if I remember correctly, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong with this, but from what I was reading of the LL archives, it seemed to me that basically, you know, like how there was the Homo erectus branch that spread out all over the world, and I'm pretty sure, you know, they probably got to Australia as well, and so some of those ended up being evolving into these different Bigfoot species, where they were kind of modified to be smart enough and strong enough to be able to do everything for themselves. And so that's kind of one of these features of these Bigfoot, is that they don't really need anyone else. They have really high levels of psychic abilities. They're very, very strong, and they can just intuitively find food. But what the extraterrestrials found was that these people were so capable that they didn't need each other. They didn't need each other for, and so they didn't grow spiritually by actually interacting with others, because they would just like mate like once or twice in a lifetime, and then they were done with social interaction. Whereas, so they made these kinds of like weaker versions, hairless apes, such as us, that need each other. We can't survive on our own. We're not strong enough. We're like weak. We're fragile, and we're not that smart. So we need each other in order to survive. And because of our dependency of groups, that gives us more opportunities for spiritual learning, since we are exposing ourselves to people who have different ideas and opinions and things like this.
And I was also wondering, because they did specify that Bigfoot was a thought form, or that specific one that he brought up the footcast of was a thought form. What is the physical remains of the death of a thought form?
I literally was just thinking the same thing, that I was going back to trying to look for it myself, because wasn't there like three different types of the thought form, and then it has something to do with their eyes, so yellow or red or something like that. So I'm trying to go back to find where it was. Yeah, anybody got an answer for that? Because I sure the heck don't.
Well, I know. Oh, Desiree.
Oh, let me mute.
Okay. Yeah. So, in terms of the thought forms, I don't know if this is on track, but I know that they also said the pyramids started out as a thought form. So maybe this Bigfoot investigator wanted to find these tracks, and then some kind of spiritual entities came along, and like thought form entities, and then produced these tracks for this researcher to find, because they really wanted to find them. That's what I'm thinking. It's just like how Ra made the pyramids. First they thought them up, and then they allowed them to manifest.
That's the general concept in the scientific and esoteric literature. You gather energy, concentrate focus, and concentrate energy to a point until it sort of condenses into what we would consider to be physical matter. And then you've got something that's condensed. But also, I was just trying to search for the interpretation there. But if you remember some of the very first things that he was saying in the first part of the first session, where he's going around between the three of them, trying to figure out who works best, jumping into the back of their mind. And then he's basically doing a DJ in them, just spitting out some words and doing some philosophy. And I think he lands in Carla the second time, and he starts talking about how, we are just the thought, a dancing thought. Everything is the thought form, and that also sounds true to our physicality, because when you get into the more modern parts of quantum mechanics and unified physics, it's all this, that's why we call it a hologram, not because the universe is an actual computer, but because it seems to be real. But when you pull it apart, it's actually not real. It's made up of this energy, like a digital energy, but not digital. It's natural, it's godly, it's super, it's love, it's everything. It's intelligence itself, being, all of this good stuff that we all thrive for. So that's kind of what the electromagnetic spectrum is. And that's why I was saying that maybe it might be some lenses where we can see the ultraviolet footprints as they're walking around the cave or something, or maybe they've left ultraviolet. Just a random thought just popped up. Semen. Like that pops up under ultraviolet light, black lights, and things like this. So it could be bodily fluids or something else like that, which then might give us some DNA, but we wouldn't be able to see the bodily fluid outside of this visual spectrum for it. It would just look like air, and you wouldn't even notice it. So there's all this really interesting stuff that does come into it. But that's also one more thing I wanted to say about that was the most, I don't know so much about the American ones. I think it's talked about a little bit, but they talk about the Australian ones where they can step through dimensions and stuff. And that's the reason why nobody can chase them down or find them. Even if you stumble into their living area in the bush, they'll be gone. You know, so it's like nobody heard anything. You can get thermal imagery and stuff like this, and nobody can detect them running away or anything like this. It's not like running into a village and then everybody scattering into the bush or anything like this. So it's there's definitely a lot of puzzle going on there.
You know, there have been some people in America that have proposed that they come in and go out through portals. And I occasionally watch one of the shows and they keep talking about, when you start getting close, all of a sudden there's this god-awful smell. Kind of their warning.
That sounds like extraterrestrials, like a lot of basically fourth density and higher. They're much more aware, like I was mentioning the previous time, that basically once we graduate to fourth density, there will be a period of time where we learn how to, say, open these portals and effectively hide from third density entities in a way that they just can't see. Like these spaceships of Hatan are a fourth density spaceship. So, they have bodies, they're living in this ship, and they're flying right above us, but that we can't see them because they're able to do this dimensional shifting thing. Yeah. And in terms of the smelly ones, I've heard those were usually the reptilians, but maybe some of the Bigfoots are smelly too.
There's the skunk ape of New Jersey, I think, too, or Florida. It smells skunky. And there's modern technology now where they're actually able to bend light around objects, sort of. It's like cloaking devices that the military is working on right now. So we're getting close to having sort of like another dimension aspect to how we can appear to ourselves. So what you're saying, they're having like cloaking abilities. That's so easy to fathom, and it's very possible.
Yeah, I just wanted to one clarifying point, that I don't believe it's necessarily technological, but rather that it's spiritual. Right. And like I've read in, I think it was Dolores Cannon, and they said that during the indigenous times, some of the indigenous villages, they were really like kind and forgiving and loving to each other, and they managed to, as a village, ascend to fourth density. And so they actually ascended to fourth density without the other groups around them. And so they actually didn't interact with those other groups. They basically had their own Earth to themselves, their own, because the third density entities were not spiritually evolved to like interact with them. So they would just like, when they would pass through the area, there would be nothing there. And the reason that we know about these is that some of those people then that had ascended to fourth density decided to come back to help us ascend. And then one of these people got into one of Dolores's canon sessions.
I recall a while back hearing somebody on YouTube talking about how they astrally projected into some of the wilderness, which would give them the ability to interact with and communicate with Bigfoot entities. You get some people who channel them as well. So this kind of really, especially the astral projection aspect of it, really implies, the gateway process, what we call in military industrial complex, your time space as opposed to space time where we inhabit, which is loosely defined as astral world. And that is, I've done the research and I did a little video on it. I'm absolutely certain that's what Ra calls the fourth density, is what we call the astral world, which is what our scientific military structures are investigating as time space. It's all the same sort of thing. And then you've got the other side of it. And then these two sort of seem to come together for the fifth dimension, which is the next level above that. You've got like mind, wisdom, compassion, wisdom, and then the unity of both of them. And then it goes beyond that. But that's really fascinating, because the ability to consciously do that, and then also to see these things, technology is meant to be an assistant aid for humanity. It's not meant to be a dependency thing. So when I'm talking about technology, I'm talking about using it in an empowerment sense, not like, the TV or anything like this. The astral world aspect to it, though, adds a really awesome aspect to it. I have done lots of astral work before, and I could definitely see that being a really legitimate viability. If anybody is capable of doing that, give it a shot. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah, as it happens, my kids were asking about Bigfoot just this week. And then I told them that if they want to communicate with Bigfoot, they just need to do a meditation or set an intention before going to bed that they want to dream with Bigfoot, and then they can do that. So they were very happy about that.
Did they try it? Anybody have any experience?
They did try it, but they didn't tell me anything afterwards. So I don't know. Kids, they forget things pretty quickly sometimes.
Is there a lesson where Ra is asked about fae and pixies, fairies?
I know in the LL archives, they mention that a lot of those are real fourth density entities. And that once we're even now, if say we're either dual activated bodies, then we will be able to at least access them with our minds. But when we're in fourth density, like fully incarnated in fourth density in like a few hundred years, several incarnations from now, then we'll be able to also bodily interact with those fairies and fourth density creatures.
I had a few of them reach out to me in a dream. I didn't go to sleep with the intention, but in the dream I encountered them. One I sort of saw, one actually completely showed herself, the other did not, but they got my attention because one of them said, "Oh, you're a dark angel." And I was like, well, I have a friend who's close to Malthus, but I didn't know what she meant.
Wow, that's cool. Ooh.
I'm going to speak for myself. I definitely believe, and I have caught on photos. I've had an instance when I was walking through the woods and I'm calling my goddaughter to come, and I had these two little things like the size of a gnat flying in front of my face. And I just kind of go like this and I keep going, and all of a sudden I stop because they're right back, and they're blue, white, glowing little gnat-sized bugs. Bugs, and one flies in front of me and one flies behind me. I'm in the woods and I can't see them anymore. And I lift up my camera, I just click, turn around, click. When I went back and reviewed them, which honestly, I forgot all about it, to be quite frank. So it was like a month later, I went back and looked, and I definitely have fairy-like beings, pixies, a whole bunch of things I found in that photo. And they were a lot larger in that photo than what it was when it was in front of my face. And I also caught a UFO that day as well, not realizing it, because my Canon camera, when I take photos, I love very picturesque in nature and everything. So I love taking photos when I'm out there. So, and I was on top of this peak looking down, or like valley, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And it took, when I take one shot, it would take three, like click, click, click of it. And in the middle one, there was a UFO in there, not in the first or the last, but that middle one. I can show you guys all that later. But Yeah. Oh, and there was just something else. I just pulled it up. Let me lower this real quick. Pew pew. Okay, so I was just on the LNL research and I just kind of put in there fairies and stuff. Okay, what did I do? Darn it. You know what? I'll just send the link in there so you can see what they all say about it because I just kind of whacked it and round and I don't know where the hell it went exactly. But yeah, they called them elemental forms. The dimensions directly involve your earth plane, which are invisible to you, are those which give the sphere of energy, which you call your planet its life. Elves, gnomes, fairies, divas, and spirits of all kinds are the elemental forms which govern the growth, the health, and the life of such things as rocks, flowers, trees, grasses, and animal life.
There is an episode of Spirit Talk, which is Chris Fleming's channel on YouTube. In Scotland, he actually uses a spirit box and talks to a gnome.
I mean, I'm not going to say that can't happen because I use spirit box. I've done paranormal investigating for over 10 years. So, I mean, I believe it, I guess. I'm not, who am I to say it's not?
I actually happen to have a spirit box, and I keep thinking I should get it out and play with it. I know I have some crossover family members that are around, but I'm wondering if those gnomes and fairies are actually around too. And I'm just
you can also use those in channeling as well. So you don't have to just talk to deceased entities. You could call in other beings, and then they can use that as a facility to try to push information through to you, which would come through the spirit box as if, you know, like it would regularly be working. You know, Iceland as well. These guys really openly talk about fae, dwarves, gnomes, all these things. If you haven't seen the fairy tale documentary from Iceland where everybody is like talking about it like it's plain as day, it's this little girl that's like, yeah, you know, I come over here on the weekends and there's a door over here and this rock right there. When the magic is active and when it's time to play, you know, these things come out. Will Ferrell just did a movie where he was in the Eurovision playing an Icelandic man going to Eurovision, and they talk about these elves in the movie as if it's just normal, you know. So there's definitely that level of it. But as shamanic practices go, the devas and stuff like that definitely there, but they're just sort of like the intelligence of the energy. And that's why we think that it's all consciousness or it's all mind. And then that mind is what we call energy. We tend to focus on the energy and forget that that mind is still there. So then you hear people talking about their, you know, gemstones that have a real personality. It's like, well, that's a rock. It's still got a very big personality to it. So do trees. So do grasses and animals and everything else. Stars. Stars have,
yeah,
we talk about astrology all the time.
I've got two different necklaces. One of them, it's an energy symbol that's from Hawaii. It has power style on it. The other one is it's a pyrite circle. I cannot wear the two at the same time. The leather strap that is knotted for the pyrite will come unknotted on its own. They just do not care for each other. But back to the dream with the fairies, they gave me their names, and I was trying to write it down. I tried it twice, and it would always fade. And I had the distinct impression that in regards to those particular three, that apparently they were different types, but somebody has done an animated film about their journey. I don't know what the movie is.
Well, if you ever figure out, get the name for it, please share. I'd be interested in watching.
Is it Spiderwick? It's an animated, well, I think no, it's not animated, but it's Spiderwick. Oh,
I don't know. I haven't seen enough of them to know. I only saw the one. The one that I perceived moving actually was making himself look like a rock. Although I didn't see full rock, I was seeing like if he had a cloak of invisibility on and he moved and I could see the cloak. I never saw the third. Just the third would say something, but I wasn't really catching what was said. Just that one going, "You're a dark angel," and I'm like, "Okay, what's a dark angel?"
Yeah, what is a dark angel?
I actually talked to somebody who's a shaman about that and about that dream, and he said, we are not allowed to record their names, which is why it would keep fading. And he said there's dark and light. Evil is something separate from dark and light, but dark and light work with each other to keep a balance. And I could kind of see it because I do take time when things come up to deal with my own shadow self or, things that I need to deal with. So I'm not going forward in life with them anymore.
Mhm.
I just wanted to randomly drop from the talk from Ra today about the 25-hour sleep cycle from Mars. So that was pretty randomly cool,
Mhm. Mhm. That was interesting.
I wish there was a little bit more of an explanation of it, though, or if anybody can explain that better for me, anyways, because I was.
So
yeah, go ahead. I was going to say that it's plenty on Quo about it.
yeah. So what I remember from Kuo, basically, well, and this might also include some other sources, I have to say, because I just read so much stuff. But basically, about 750,000 years ago, Mars and Maldek were in a war, and then they used the moons of Saturn as like Death Stars, and they blew up Maldek. And at the time that they blew up Maldek was right next to Mars, and it blew the atmosphere off of Mars. And so within a few months, everyone on Mars also perished. But some extraterrestrial group named Yahweh, at least in our understanding, saved some of these people, and then they moved them, I think, to the moon, and then they moved them underground here for a while, and they're basically giant red-headed giants, and then eventually they hybridized some of those red-headed giants with the Homo sapiens in order to get some Martian genetics, and they're red-headed people.
So, but why does that make the 25 though instead of the normal 24?
Because when they lived on Mars, they had a 25-hour day.
Okay, all right. Because I'm like, I know all that other stuff. I just 2 plus 2 equals 4, Desiree. 2 plus 2 equals 4.
I just watched a program about the red-headed giants in Americas, and the Indians. They were also cannibals, and the Indians went and trapped the last remaining ones because they got tired of getting, hunted for food. So they went and they built this big fire in front of the cave and killed the rest of them. And they found the cave where this supposedly happened. And there's signs of intense heat. And one of the Indian women, I think she was like either a healer or a chief or whatever. She had the red hair braided into a like a necklace, that when they talked about this, it was a remembrance of what happened. So it was really quite interesting. So they're redhead giants. Yeah. Today.
Yep. There's red-headed mummies that were found, I believe, in China.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to also say the length of a day on Mars currently is 24 hours and 37 minutes. So it's almost 25 hours on Mars right now.
So this 18-day cycle, is that what does that pertain to? Our body rhythm, or what?
That's the adept cycle for spiritual abilities, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh, 18 is also it's a sacred number amongst Tibetans and Jewish people. So, and then the Ra is mentioning it. So I think it's one of those things that is verifiable.
Mhm. Okay. So it starts at birth, then every
Yep.
18 days. Is it actually 18 days or?
So in the first 9 days, it goes up and down. So 4, 5, 6, it's at the top. And then the next 9 days, it's going down below 0,
Mhm.
like that.
Okay,
And then it goes
got
back
it.
up to 0.
Goes
Yeah.
back up. Okay. Understand that now. I didn't know what they were talking about at first. Mhm.
But yeah, I think the changes might be like a fraction of a percent. Like, so you
Right.
may be more in tune, but you can probably still do most of the same things.
Hmm.
Yeah, so essentially it's telling you like what days where you're going to be at your most powerful and your
Mhm.
I just went back. I'm just reading it again. I have to keep doing that to like get it in my head.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know in ancient times, like nowadays in modern magical practices, everything is like, oh, me. But in ancient times, it was all about the stars and the alignment of the stars.
Mhm.
And so, they were like, okay, if the moon is in that sign and then the star is in that sign, then you put out a bowl,
Mhm.
at on the full moon, and then it will have these attributes.
Mhm.
And so, I think that there's some interest in that as well, because there's the cycles of the planets, and Ra mentions that astrology is can be used anyways.
Mhm.
I remember wasn't there some kind of, it was almost like a warning saying, sort of like, don't do more than like one thing. Like if you're gonna do astrology, do astrology. If you're gonna do the tarot, do tarot. Don't kind of mix them up. It's what it's almost seemed like. I got the gist of that out of there.
From Ra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then how would you explain the human design when the human design kind of takes all of those into consideration and puts it all together? Not so much, I guess, tarot, well, I don't know, but astrology, I Ching, all that other crap. The Kabbalah.
I I think that there's several aspects to this. One is that if you stick to one thing, it's just like sticking to one partner. If you stick to one partner for a long period of time, then you're like, the honeymoon phase is the first year and a half where they're perfect, and then you start to see the cracks. And then, like, after 3 years, you're like, how could I ever have gotten together with this person? But then that's also where you're kind of, as they say, you're two crystals rubbing against each other, and you're taking off the flack, the imperfections. And so by sticking to one practice, you're doing the same thing. It's like having a partner, and then you're seeing the cracks in it after some time, but then you're wearing those away. And so then, like, by sticking to one practice, you can really refine it, and then get to the one infinite creator kind of thing. And in terms of the tarot and the astrology, I think the reason Ra may have been a little bit upset about that was because they had mixed it together in the tarot, where a lot of the tarot cards had astrology symbols in them, which was confusing to the people because it's supposed to be about archetypes. And then when you put in the astronomical things, it's not about the astronomy. That's like a different symbology system. So if you study them separately, basically.
And he was attributing the astrology symbols to the Chaldeans too. So, and the tarot was more Egyptian from Ra's perspective, I believe.
Yeah, the major arcana was what Ra had been taught, and the minor arcana, or what we consider as the regular deck of cards, the 56 cards, if you will, those were from the Chaldeans, and they were used for divination purposes.
Yeah, each one of the minor tarot match out with the days of the year in relation to the cycle of the stars. So the entire minor tarot matches out to a star wheel. And the, of course, major arcana is more to do with psychology, like Jungian archetypal type, so dark, shadow, light work type stuff. So mixing the two of them, you can mix and match anything as long as you know what you're doing. But then somebody else is going to pick that up and then think that it's real, without knowing everything that you're doing with it, without being taught how to use it and all the different variables and the different lessons in astrology which match up with the correlations of this and that. And that's also like human design, and Gene Keys is the other one, which is really good. They've got a whole correlation of all these different esoteric teachings overlaid into one system. But also, I can't remember whereabouts in the general Ra storyline of the conversation, but he says somewhere, Don's always asking, how do these 7 things correlate with 7 chakras? Or do these 7 chakras correlate with, something else? And Ra's often answer is along the lines of, well, it's not exactly a direct mirror, copy for copy for copy, but it is helpful to observe similarities in all areas of your reality, basically. So take any area you want, see the interrelations, and learn from the as you cross-relay different fields of information. That's a really easy way to learn new things. And that's how we gather information in data sciences, is we just get lots of numbers from random measurements. You start laying them in grids and patterns, and then you start seeing information come out of that as a result of how you'd sort of shuffle the information around. So then it starts taking on that characteristic of showing you what it's trying to show you. And then you've got to remember that that's coming out of it. It's not sort of it, because it is separate pieces. So the tarot is the tarot, and it's made up of parts and pieces. But if you pick up the tarot and go, oh my God, this is like magic, and think of it like a Bible, you're completely missing the point, But it's the same thing. Like I said, pick up anything on that surface level, and your ignorance then gives that blind sight to how it all works and how it all comes together. But then don't take that as biblical, canon law, because everything is as it is and it always changes relative to the circumstance.
I think another important point is that on Venus, Ra had never had cards with like paper cards with like little pictures on them. They had basically just talked about these archetypes as like, sometimes you're a hermit, sometimes you are the the matrix of the mind, sometimes you're the significator, and things like that. And then they would talk about like life events and like stages of your life, and then you would relate to those events or stages of your life as the archetype. And that's kind of what people are supposed to get out of studying the archetypes in the tarot, is to see, okay, there is this woman holding a lion's head, in a gentle way. So, and that it's called strength. And then, so where is the strength? It's not a physical strength. It's a kind of a spiritual strength of like an inner strength. And so it's like, when have you felt like, there was this strong thing, but because of your strong internal strength, you managed to maintain peace and harmony and love. When were you in strength?
Makes sense.
Yeah, he does say also, like you're saying, if I can quote the memory, the student would sit down in meditation and contemplate these archetypes, go through them one for the other, and then spend possibly days, weeks, months focusing on one before moving on to the other. And there's all these different ways to do it. That's really cool. But also navigating and changing, is also really important as well. I was trying to find some information on a giant, and I heard somebody talking about how that tied in with some other stuff. I can't remember now, but yeah.
Which giant?
Oh, well, there's been a couple of museums I've seen here and there on Facebook, apparently, who've had giant remains, and I was just trying to search them out. There was one in Argentina or South America somewhere that had a new giant human display open to the public. And then I got distracted in Smithsonian articles from 1808 about giants and things like this.
But they disappeared. The remains.
They destroyed them.
Yeah,
Someone.
well, that would counter. I mean, it would cause havoc with when they found them, and so I'm sure that the religious leaders kind of went, we got to get rid of this stuff or whatever.
Or turn them into dinosaur bones.
I don't know if you can do that.
A lot of the dinosaur bones are probably not even dinosaur.
Well, how's that? I mean, the dinosaur bones are pretty darn big.
Yeah, well, they weren't giants. I'm not saying that's what they are, but we find pieces and then we imagine what the rest looks like. Like a lot of the dinosaurs we see in the museum are, the leg might be real, but then they kind of pretend what the rest looks like. I'm just saying that to my voice, a way of hiding the evidence.
Well, they just found out that a lot of the dinosaurs were warm-blooded. They assumed they were all cold-blooded, but some of them were warm-blooded. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I know in Central and South America, giants are really big. They've even got as in popular. I don't mean they're very big. Well, they're also big. They have museums dedicated to all of these giant statues and things like that. And they have all of these excavations of these giants. And and you're right about the dinosaurs in terms of that the dinosaurs you see when you go to a museum, those are all just plaster casts. Those are not real bones. None of those are real bones, because the real bones are held in some facility somewhere, and they're radioactive. They're usually radioactive because they're found in these old ocean bottoms with lots of, where basically the fossilization process is that the uranium or whatever is in the surrounding metals kind of fills in what used to be the bone and turns it into a rock. And that's why they're often radioactive.
Oh, did not
So
know
have you
that.
guys ever heard of Nephilim?
Nephilim?
Yeah. So that's what popped in my head when you're talking about giants and giant remains. That's always a possibility too. That they're just remains of the Nephilim.
Yeah, there's many kind of names for it. I'm not exactly sure where I would put them in the order, but I know during the time of Atlantis, they had very large morphological variability in the body's sizes and types, because they were they had a crystal-based technology. A lot of it was spherical rocks. We still have lots of spherical rocks in Central America, but one of the things they like to do a lot was to make human animal hybrids. So like a dog with a human face, or the kinds of things. And then, some of them were able to reproduce or whatever, but this was a very painful process. And at first it was a benevolent process. And then say they made a mermaid, and then, that mermaid would be a part of the family, and the mermaid would get them some seafood, and they would be nice to the mermaid. But then later on, they started taking it for granted, and they just started making more and more of these things. And then they had no use for them, and they started putting them in gladiator arenas where they would fight to the death. And then things went downhill from there.
They would start taking man's women for themselves, right, and reproducing with men's wives, which made just big people.
Oh yeah. The Ra mentions that in another session where Yahweh definitely other extraterrestrial groups as well just came down, and then they just said the women look beautiful, we're going to reproduce with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
usual way.
Yeah. Yahweh has been known to switch back and forth between what his true path was and, you know, who he affiliated himself with, you know, and he's had to sign contracts to redo his path, which is supposed to be, you know, the Jesus type guy, you know, and show the people, but supposedly he's good again.
Yeah, well,
I know that sounds crazy, but
there was basically two Yahwehs in the Bible. There was the original good Yahweh, who had the best intentions, but a lot of their best intentions didn't work out so well. But then after the whining and the complaining in the desert, there stepped in the positive Yahweh left, because like these guys don't care about me, and a negative Yahweh with the same frequency and name, which was basically a service to self Orion entity, came in and was like, it would sometimes do good things for them, but mostly it was like, okay, you gotta do some more killing and do some more things to increase the amount of fear and anger, because that's what the service to self entities feed on. So they made that whole blood sacrifice culture for them. And
So when did the negative Yahweh come into play versus the first Yahweh?
so basically when Moses went up the mountain.
So that was the negative.
Yeah,
Yahweh.
the Ten
The
Commandments were from the negative Yahweh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the Bible, the Old Testament, is full of killings and, you know, and all that. And then, you know, then Jesus comes and then it's love your neighbor like you should, you know, love yourself and blah, blah, blah. So, okay.
Yeah. I read the Christ Letters recently. It's a very good book. And I think it's a genuine channeling, and it's one of the most detailed. And the person, the channel says that they basically incarnated with the sole purpose of being a good channel for Jesus. And so what they say as Jesus is that when they were in the desert, they were actually with God, with the loving God, and they learned all about creation, and they wanted to help spread the teachings to everyone. But then they came out, Jesus came out of the desert, and then there was an angel. It's like, it'll take them thousands of years to figure this out. and then Jesus talked to all these people, and they didn't understand, and they were holding on to their old Judaic ways. And at some point he was like, you know what, guys, I'm just gonna die. I'm gonna die, guys. And they're like, no, you're not gonna die. And they're like, no, I'm gonna die. And then he was at the temple, and then like some guys were speaking over him because they were doing the money changing, and he just flipped the tables. And then the Pharisees were like, okay, and all the money lenders were like, he's from Beelzebub, he's from the devil. And the Pharisees were like, he's from the devil. And they managed to convince all of his disciples that he was from the devil, or the vast majority of them. And then, you know, that night was the Last Supper.
Right.
And then, you know, he was dead the next day or whatever. And so, yeah. And so he also concludes that the reason for his death is that he preached a God of love, which was different from the God of vengeance that the Jews worshipped. And because of this is why they killed him. And
what about
reason.
the prophecy though? You know, the biblical prophecy, was that, I'm just asking if you know if it was written after Jesus died or prior, because there was a prophecy that was, you know, said
fulfilled.
Fulfilled this prophecy, the Abraham, you know, and all that.
Yeah. I believe he also fulfilled this prophecy. And a lot of these things, how they happen is that there's a large calling for it. The Jewish people were calling for the fulfillment of this prophecy. And so he came and he fulfilled it because of the calling. He fulfilled the prophecies as they expected them to be.
Mhm.
And he was the emanation of the true God, which is the loving God. But that was different from what they expected him to be. They expected him to be a vengeful, genocidal God, which is the one that they put in Revelation, right? The Revelation is the
Right.
God that they wanted. Whereas, like, say, Matthew, Mark, and John is the God that they got.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
So Mike, again, my question is, who started the prophecy? Who put that prophecy into motion? You know, was it, who was it? Was it,
It was a combination of,
oh,
those prophets and the Jewish people,
uh-huh,
and they compiled it over a while, and then it was just like we were talking about with that Bigfoot. It started out as a thought form,
right.
and then when there were enough people that were like, yeah, this is how it's going to happen, this is how it's going to
Mhm,
happen, and then they helped manifest this
mhm,
through the life of Jesus,
right.
or
Often,
Yeshua ben Joseph.
I
The
often,
first media control.
mhm,
Yeah.
right. I often thought that, oh gosh, I just went out in my head. With all the killings and why God, with Adam and Eve, say Adam and Eve, why he wouldn't just say, okay, this is bad, this is good, or why would he keep them in ignorance, so to speak, of good and bad, and why not just say, this is how it is, and I'm the creator or whatever, and and then I often go, why did why were we created? That was another of my questions when I started all this. Why did God create us? What was his intentions, or what was the purpose of of him creating humans, and then expecting us to not know the right and from wrong, and just
Can I answer
basically,
this?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
sure, if you
sure.
want. Yeah, I
so
have an
there,
answer too, but yeah, go ahead.
all right. So my point is, there was a video that was put up on the Law of One group. It was someone that was talking about different kind of a channeling that had to do with the Law of One. Back in the Adam and Eve days, the God that they had back then, they were his children, and he wanted his children always to know him and always to obey him. And in return, he kept them safe. And, they didn't worry about nothing. They just, everything was, manifested at will. And, they had a pure connection with God. And the story was God went up to, the team of gods, let's call it, and say, how can I get my people to move along faster, uh, to evolve quicker? And they said, well, give them free will. And if they say, well, if we give him free will, they won't, because to have free will, you gotta have like a veil, right? And he said a lot of them won't obey me, and a lot might not, because what happens with free will becomes the ego. So you all kind of think you're an individual God. So at that point, when free will happened, and let's say she picked the apple off the tree, because in her mind is, oh, I don't need God. I could just pick the apple and eat. I don't need him doing it for me. So supposedly that God is gone. That was like the fear God, and then I think the Law of One explains it also, is that almost like a new God was put in, and like the game was changed. Now it was more of a school for souls because of free will. Um, so once free will was given, it spread through humanity like a disease. The free will was her eating the apple. I'm going to do this with my own will. Like, I'm going to pick this apple. I'm not going to depend on God or anything like that, and that was kind of.
But if God knows, he knows the future, the past, the present, then he knew, this is my whole thing, then he knew what was going to happen. So free will gave him, there's like, okay, are they going to go this way or that way? But if he knows what's going to happen, he knows. So this is where I've, gone through.
So the LL Archives actually gives very detailed explanation of the whole Garden in Eden thing, and so they explain that this is actually a metaphor of the how, say, 100,000 years ago we had the Homo sapiens, like the bodies, they were already available, but they were still second density entities. They were still part of the God source. They did not have a veil yet. They did not. So when you don't have a veil,
well, they didn't need it. They didn't need it because they weren't. They knew what they needed to do to survive. But as far as the spiritual aspect and just art, the stuff that the higher learning stuff, they didn't have that, correct?
Yeah. So 75,000 years ago is when this Earth entered into third density. And the reason that they have a female taking the apple is because women are more receptive to spiritual abilities, kind of thing. They're more psychically in tune, and they're the potentiator, whereas the male is the matrix. And so that's why they had a woman take the apple in this metaphorical story. And to what iPhone person was saying, Mike, right? So basically before they had the veil, it would take 500 million years in order for an average soul to progress from second density to fourth density, whereas after the veil, it's now 75,000 years. So it's a much faster spiritual evolution.
Right. So it was kind of give them free will and they will evolve faster, right?
Yeah.
So the evolution went a lot quicker because they had free will, because we looked for facts and we looked for truth, and just evolve faster.
Well, it's because we get confused and we make up very silly ideas. And then after we graduate, we pursue our silly ideas that we came up with while we were under the veil. Because if we don't have a veil, then we just go for the most obvious answer, which everyone already knows.
Yeah.
So all of the novelty comes from the third density, or a lot of the novelty comes from the third density, whereas the latter densities are kind of an exploration of what we did in that blindfolded period.
You were when you read that Jesus letters to Jesus from Jesus, did he channel whoever? Did they channel what he was doing after he grew up and before he started preaching? Is there that period of time?
Yes.
Because I have often asked about that period of time.
So he says that he was a lazy guy. And basically he just did whatever he wanted, and he just kind of hang out at his mom's, and then he didn't want to work. And then, like, if he needed some money, he'd go work at the winery, pick some grapes. And then, like, he was just kind of a slacker, and he was really angry with a lot of people. and because he didn't like their vengeful God, and he was very skeptical of their religion and all of that. And it was actually only after he decided to get baptized and then went to the desert to be with God that he got all of this revelation, and then his vibration rose to kind of like that divine level, and then afterwards he was able to teach from like that divine level without getting into that anger stuff until the very end, just before when he was like, okay, I'm gonna die, and then he started descending, and then when he descended enough that he started to get angry again, that's when he flipped the tables, just before,
Right,
shortly before
right.
Where are you saying this is all from?
this is from a book called The Christ Letters. I have a copy of it on my website. I'll link it in the description.
Is that what you were also speaking of, that the origin of where you were speaking of about the Garden of Eden and everything?
No, that was from the LL archives, the Garden of Eden thing. I could try to find that session as well, but it'll take me a few minutes here.
Okay, I'll
No.
go back and look up.
No, I heard that he had gone actually to, what is it, Tibet to learn from the
India.
India. Okay. So he actually did go there, and there is proof that he went
I
there.
see it.
Yeah, I heard to Kashmir.
Okay. How
Yeah.
long did he stay there?
It doesn't mention it in the Christ Letters, unfortunately. I think that there definitely was, like I said, it was about 60 to 80% pure. There was some bias on behalf of the channel themselves, and they didn't say a lot of the things. But I'm pretty sure he spent years in Kashmir.
Okay.
And may I address something again on what Amanda was talking about? I also was very ingrained in traditional religion. I was raised Catholic, and I was a born again Christian. I was a Satanist. I've studied the Bible pretty deeply for over the past 40 some years. And one thing that really helped me break free from the old God of the Old Testament was just logic. When I logically looked at something like the Garden of Eden, and I'm seeing that here's a God who created everything, and he puts the most beautiful tree right in the middle of the perfect garden, and then says to his two creations, do not touch that tree. Who sounds like the great tempter in that story?
Right.
Who is the great tempter? Who often tempts? The Dark Lord. The Dark Lord is the one who tempts us. And even though the prayer that Jesus said, he says, lead us not into temptation, we see how the God of the Old Testament had that temptation tool. He put something beautiful in front of his children and then told them not to touch it. Don't do this. Why was it there then? Don't do that. He was the one responsible for destroying their innocence and blamed something else. He blames a serpent that talked. Well, he had to have made that serpent which talked because he created everything. And evil exists because he created everything. So I was able to break myself free from all of that old indoctrination just by logically looking at that cannot be the God of love. It just cannot be.
Right. I looking at the Garden of Eden, I asked the question to somebody. I go, he placed, angels at each corner of the garden. I said, well, who is he keeping out or who is he keeping in? Why did you need the protection if there was nobody else on the earth?
Yeah,
So
it was a laboratory.
I was like, okay, I don't get this. And because like you said, I was raised both sides of the coin here, and I did the Catholic thing, and then I went and studied with the witnesses, and I wasn't happy with either. I can't say I wasn't happy because I always felt connected, to the source God. I always felt very connected, but I started asking questions, like I said, I was really getting, I was mad, and then I was hurt. All these things were going through my head, and I approached my mom, and she's like, "Well, what's wrong with you?" I said, "Nothing's wrong. I'm asking you these questions because I need to know." So yeah, I understand it.
There's some really amazing discussions about all of this in the Conversations with God as well. And it's a very realistic, logical take on a lot of it. It's so logical that Neil Donald Walsh is constantly in conversation with God, saying to God, "Oh, the fundamental Christians are going to absolutely hate this," because it's logical, but that's the reason why we're not allowed to ask questions, is because when you get into that fearful, judgmental state, it's about fear is love. There's some nuns in religious schools who say to their children when they're beating them, this is the love of the Father. It's like, well, that's
My
pretty. Well,
husband,
technically, everything is, but
yeah, my husband went to a Catholic school, and he said it was the worst. He said the nuns were mean. He said that him and his sisters, they all went to the school, and his sister got sick in the classroom, and the nun was going to make him clean it up. He's like, "Oh no, I'm not," no. And then he says, "I'm out of here." And him and his sisters walked out of the school because they were so mean.
Wow.
And not, and
Can
They had a
I
very
shift the conversation a little bit? I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to head off. But before I did, I wanted to bring up with you guys something that I've got that I've been working on for a little while. It's really hard to describe in short. I'm trying the best I can to talk more about it to learn how to communicate it better to people. But it's and I've got Desiree's permission to bring this up, of course. It's not about, I'm not asking you to give me your money, and it's not about that, but it's about service to this whole concept. Because what I want to do is I want to get 5,000 people who want to donate $10 a month to completely changing the entire way that we manage plastic around the world. This includes recycled plastic as well as non-recyclable plastic. This is an actual solution to one of the largest problems that we've got on the face of the planet. And it's one that creates jobs, facilitates health, creates industry, creates technology, digital jobs for kids and stuff like this. As short as possible, it's a monthly, $5,000, $10 a month, Australian dollars, because I'm here in Australia and I've done all the finances to work this all out. I will be able to start manufacturing once a month a shipping container with machines in it that I can then donate to communities. I'm not going to sell these to communities. I'm just going to give them to communities. So that way people can come recycle their own plastic, melt down plastic, put it into different pieces. Like if you go out camping and you've got a plastic plate and one of the kids sits on it, gets a crack in the middle of the plate, in the bin. Well, why don't you just melt it back into place, right? So there's a way that we can change how we view a permanent material, which is usually the negative part of plastic, as actually one of its beneficial properties. So if we manage how we do plastic differently like this and make it a valuable resource rather than a disposable, annoying thing that we're just trying to bring food home in, then we can really change a lot of how we do this. It starts off as this single shipping container. The next part would be a second shipping container with 3D printers, as well as a laptop or two. And then you've got a place where kids want to do graphic design, AutoCAD engineering type programs. You can do 3D print scans, so you can do custom equipment for people's cars or people's houses. If you want extra storage devices for your caravan, it's like hyper customization for everybody's life. This brings down commercialism around all of the worst parts of our society and the problems with the free market. People always talk about driving up the GDP, but that actually is having a decrease on the quality of life around the world at the moment. So the whole approach of what I'm trying to give you an idea of today is where we shift from looking at this whole idea as a financial concept to being a humanitarian concept. And when we do that, we can really actually, within the next 6 months, start making, like, it makes me really emotional when I think about it, massive, excuse my Australian, fucking change. I've got a Patreon and a website for it. I'll share it in the Law of One group so you can check it out. I've got some videos about the technology, as well as a video from Canada where a local school group did the whole ship a container, melt the plastic down, and everybody can benefit from an idea. So it's not the first time this type of thing has been done. I'm just sort of bringing together all these different aspects and trying to get it out there. I'm not the CEO of it. It's a non-for-profit organizational structure, and it's not going to be on the stock exchange. So it's basically taking the top half of a traditional commercial pyramid and getting rid of all the fat cats. And then actually I'm going to flip that pyramid so all the bottom workers are at the top, because as we've always known, it's the people who do the work that are the most important. Right? So it's really revolutionary in every way that I could possibly think of, using philosophies like Law of One, giving back, being of service, but in a way that doesn't impact people. It's $10 a month. Right? It just boggles my mind. How simple is that? So yeah, I wanted to bring that up into the group before I ran out of time today.
I mean, we waste $10 a month on, I drink triple, quadruple that a month in just coffee. And to make a difference.
Thank you for your service. That's incredible. I am so down for something like that. So yeah, just put it in the Law of One and I'll read about it.
Right.
Me too.
Well, the two things. Well, one, I wanted to respond to, I believe it was Robert. He was talking about the serpent thing, and that just reminded me that whenever you're reading the Bible, you've got to take into context that Abraham and the Canaanites are from Babylon, and so they had a unique culture. And often, if you look historically through cultures often define themselves in opposition to their neighbors. And so their neighbors were the Egyptians. And amongst the Egyptians, the snake was the symbol of wisdom. And so they kind of said a bunch of bad stuff about snakes in their own texts to distinguish themselves from the Egyptians. So I think that could kind of explain it there.
Yeah, that does. Mm-hmm.
And in terms of what Trevor was talking about here, I've been doing kind of a similar thing with helping transition and things like that. I've been praying for these like co-creation centers and things like that. And actually, as it so happens, we got a federal grant for like $500,000 in my community. Now, like, I don't have it, but I know the two people who are in charge of the money, and we have a wing of a local university. They gave us 9 rooms. And then we can fill it with as much makerspace stuff as we want, like 3D printers and woodworking shops and sewing machines and metalsmithing and
cool.
All that stuff. And then with the grant, we can buy all the stuff that we want to fill it. And so, yeah, we're just in the process of doing that, but it takes a lot longer than you might think. to do all that stuff.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, I'm also lobbying the great county mayors and stuff, and to help do start transitioning because the oil is ending, and so I'm also interviewing all these experts from around the world, with like video interviews. I don't know if you've seen my peak oil stuff. Anyways, and so yeah, it's happening. Because basically within the next 8 to 14 years, we're going to run out of oil, and then we're going to get into one of those shit hits the fan scenarios where if right now our medical systems are collapsing because the energy return on investment is dipped below 12. Once it dips below about like 9, they won't be able to afford to pay for education anymore, and then the people won't really be able to go to work to harvest more oil, and then they'll just quit and take care of their own families, and then there won't be any fuel for the trucks, and there won't be any fuel for the tractors, and then there won't be any food in the cities, and then we're going to have a zombie-like apocalypse. So it's good to have a rural area where you're growing some food that you can that's reasonably far from those zombie places. Future zombie places. All is
That's
well and
why
all will
I'm-
be well.
That's why I'm going to Mexico. Going to New Mexico for that exact reason.
Oh, New Mexico. Well, it's very dry there. It's so you also have to make sure you can grow enough food. So
Yeah.
just make sure
Oh
that.
yeah, we could grow food there. There's a whole community that that's all they do, and they're self-sufficient. And I just want to
Awesome.
be part of something like that. So
Nice. Yeah, main thing is whales in those deserts. And then you can have a food forest. And then you can get all your food. Amaranth and there's a bunch of
Amaranth,
other
yeah.
stuff.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
All right. Well,
I mean,
think
clearly-
you got. Oh,
Just
go
I
ahead,
was
Trevor.
just going to say hemp
Go ahead.
as well, obviously.
Hemp. Mhm.
Hemp, yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I thank all you guys for sharing. It is almost 10 p.m., so I'm going to close it out. Any of the information you guys want to share on the page, please do. But get your messages out.
all right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a
Y'all
great
have a great
night.
night.
Love you all.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Love
much.
you all
Love
too.
you.
Bye.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.